thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about the story of Tangible Africa that was birthed in Nelson Mandela University at Gqeberha, but it got its global wings through the excellent work by the Lever Foundation and NPO in Port Elizabeth. But I want us to start with a reality check, a South African reality check. We've got facilitators working all over the country and the continent. And one of our facilitators visited this gogo close to Qunu in the rural Eastern Cape, where they found the gogo having to be in bed the whole morning, every day, until her grandchildren came home to feed her and to treat her. But the closing of his message really struck me. He said, if it wasn't that they were reliant on her grant, I would have prayed that she would rather die. We'll visit Gogo later in this talk. Over 30 years of lecturing, the core passion for me has always been to ignite potential and to see young people get hope. So year after year, my students from townships and rural areas would come to me and say, Prof, please come to our school. Please come to our village. They don't know about computer careers. So I went. But every time I stood in a school with no computers, no electricity, trying to talk to them about C# and Python, I realized I'm talking into a vacuum. And I became despondent. Because how are we going to bridge the digital divide for the 16,000 schools in South Africa that do not have computers? So when Byron Batterson came to me in 2017 and he said, Prof, I want to do an honors project where we teach coding to learners without the use of computer labs, I was immediately sold. And it became kind of the last song of my career for me and Byron and many others now. And I have to acknowledge my son, who's here, and he challenged me to roll this out, to make this more than an honors project. And I want to focus on the 5 objectives which Byron and myself set ourselves in January 2017. Inclusivity, engagement, quality, global expansion, and impact. Inclusivity means that you can reach a child with coding without needing electricity, without needing computer labs, without needing internet, and without costing R1 million to build a lab. And so we immediately set out and said, but this whole project must be about interactive play, about group work. So that was the foundation on which we built our project. This is at the launch of our Rangers game in Addo Elephant Park. The facilitator is Jackson Chabalala, who's now our global engagement manager. And you'll see we use physical tokens, and the learners build their code using these tokens. It's like puzzle pieces. They get a challenge on the screen, you'll see now. That's the Rangers pack. Well, you all get that, and I hope you'll be playing by tonight. So there's the challenge where you've got to catch the game poacher, and at the end you get some information about poaching in Africa. So what this game allows me and us, I've got to stop saying me, we're hundreds participating, is to teach the same coding concepts that would be taught in an introductory course at Harvard, literally to a learner under a tree in Zambia. The code that I would teach, the concepts, the complexity can be taught through a game under a tree in Zambia. And I just need to be some technical term here. We call this unplugged coding versus plugged coding, which is where you use many computer labs and expensive devices. There is a little debate, so I need to say, some people say this is not really unplugged, but because phones are generally available, I'm going for unplugged. But inclusivity is not just about reaching the child. We very soon found out that it's about reaching the teacher. We all know the concept of FOMO, fear of missing out. I once had a headmaster crying when I went to him and said, we can start teaching coding in your school. I rather call it anxiety of missing out. Because our teachers and our headmasters in the rural and disadvantaged areas are hearing all this coding and robotics talk on radio. They hear Ramaphosa speaking about it in Parliament, but they know they don't have any resources. and teachers have become despondent. One of them is Lusanda Makungo, who gave up a full-time post here in the Western Cape to go back to Tsongo to go and teach her kids technology. She had one laptop. And then in July 2020, she found out about our virtual coding tournament where kids literally in the mountains in Tsongo could participate. I remember she still bought data for each one of them. And afterwards she wrote to me and she said, "Prof, thanks for allowing my learners to participate independent of the environment." And which we liked, she said, "My headmaster is now smiling." Lusanda Makungo became Ricardo in Belhar, Dorothy in Msileni in North KZN, Bessie in Northeast Zambia, and Yusuf, who works in one of the most impoverished areas in Nairobi. And it became inclusive for these educators. Inclusivity took a total new dimension for us last year when we launched all our coding games for the partially sighted and the blind. So now we have kids who are totally blind participating in tournaments with kids that are totally sighted by using 3D printing and touch and braille. It's emotional to see this happen. Inclusivity cannot happen if you want to reach the disadvantaged school without corporate sponsors. And we said from the outset, we're not going to focus on journal papers, we're going to focus on stories. Because our corporates want to hear stories. They want to feel good about where their funds go. And being in Stellenbosch, I need to acknowledge De Toy from Ceres, Capitec, whose head office is here, and this week, Fiber Time, who's also head office here in Stellenbosch. So thanks for Stellenbosch for being part of the story. We also realize we cannot go into communities from the outside. So our main implementation partners are the NGOs, the coding clubs, the local libraries, entrenched in communities. And we've seen this happen across the world, across Africa. And interesting, our biggest partners have become libraries situated in townships, in rural communities. I have to acknowledge the huge role of libraries. Engagement. It does not help you inclusive when you get to a child and you give him or her something they don't enjoy. So we had to say to ourselves from the day one, our games have to be fun. We don't want to do assessments and keep it serious. It's got to be fun from the start. So for even the teachers, we say to them, and my staff don't like me saying this, when we start training, we say, if you don't laugh today, go and see a psychologist, you've got too many problems. And they enjoy 4 hours of training, they interact. What you see on the left-hand side is something we call tangible chess, which has become the national sport for unplugged coding. Our team developed it in partnership with SATU 2 years ago, and it's still played all over the country. But because we have a game that has levels of increasing complexity, there's immediately an engagement of kids competing against each other. So whenever we start with a workshop, within the first 5 minutes, you have a vibrancy and an energy that you see nowhere else. I've had teachers tell me that have taught for 30 years that they've never seen a tool that creates so much engagement within minutes. But because you have levels that need to be completed, you can also have tournaments. And our biggest flagship project is our annual Coding for Mandela tournament, which happens this year across Africa, and where kids participate at sites, and we have national winners, etc. And I'll talk more about that now. But even in Gqeberha, we've had 6 schools that have started a coding league with a floating trophy. So for the first time, we've seen coding. Tangible chess makes it a contact sport. They literally get physical. But the tournaments makes it a spectator sport. The parents literally come and watch the kids code. When we talk about quality, this has probably been our biggest fight. Because when people think coding at schools, they think C# and Java and Python. And we had to convince educationists that at school it's not about C# and Python. It's first of all, not the responsibility of a school, especially a primary school, to create software developers. And secondly, it's not about coding. So our philosophy is once we've brought coding to the school, the unplugged coding, and we diagnostically identified the talent, and we made them aware of the careers, etc., we say to them, now we're not going to teach you how to code further. Now we want you to go and get a good matric so that you can go to a university and become a software developer. So a big focus of our work is academies. For example, in Tsomo, every Saturday, 15 kids come from rural villages on taxis into town for tutoring on maths and English. In Port St. John's, in Milnerton, in Walmer Township, every second Saturday, a bunch of matrics get intensive maths training. So though for us it's about coding, coding in a vacuum without a good matric means nothing. But it's not about coding. And just to keep happy, I sometimes say only about coding. Because we have to acknowledge that the kids we reach out, the 120,000 we've reached, 5% will become software developers. So is the rest irrelevant? No. What we need to see is that this coding, which the government is now bringing in, is much more important in teaching what we call the 21st century skills. Problem solving, strategy, communication, listening, group work. So we've realized that although we talk coding, although we want software developers, 95% of our learners, those skills need to be enhanced. So we developed lesson materials all offline, none of them need technology, where we also introduce concepts like digital design, digital citizenship, computational thinking, problem solving, design thinking. And the kids can all do this literally under the trees, wherever they are. Global expansion. This came as a surprise to me because originally we thought, okay, whatever we do in South Africa is relevant for Africa. That's natural. So it was normal for us to see kids in a Maasai village playing rangers, or kids playing in one of the most impoverished suburbs of Nairobi. And we now see movements all over Africa that have got their own life. We just hear about them every now and then. But then, Brendan Cannon from AWS and Community in Dublin said, come and train our teachers. And I was scared. I'm going to a modern country where the schools probably all have computers, they have all their robots, and what am I going to teach them using puzzles? And within 5 minutes of the training session in Dublin, I relaxed. The teachers responded as excitingly as teachers in South Africa. Why? Because they say the kids in Europe and the developed world are so overburdened with technology, just to have fun and group work and interaction, to learn how to solve problems, sold it to them within minutes. And it's gone so far that our Rangers game, which you'll get in today, is now being distributed to all the primary schools across Ireland with a microbit as a national PhD project, investigating how it builds teacher confidence in teaching their new coding and robotics curriculum next year. We've now trained, have you heard before, teachers in Germany, in Cyprus, and in May, I'm going to say hundreds of teachers in Indonesia. And we specifically work with universities, faculties of education in Indonesia, and they immediately realized, acknowledged the value of computational thinking and all these skills being taught through our games. Last night, over midnight, when I woke up this morning, our new soccer game called Code Cup was deployed. And it's now the first time we're announcing this. This will be launched on Tuesday with Tottenham Hotspur in London. But impact. Let's come back to why we really do this. You've heard about the 120,000 learners. Our own team has trained 5,000 teachers. In partnership with all the teacher unions, we've trained over 30,000 teachers. Last year, we had 16,000 learners at our Mandela Day tournaments across Africa. This year, in 3 weeks' time, we're well away to have 30,000 learners participating, over 100 sites. We even had a World Cup with 55 teams from 22 countries participating. But impact is not about statistics. Impact is about what really happens in people's minds. And the first thing that we really feel good about is that in 2 years ago, in 2022, we started working with SATU and SAOE and NATU in rolling out unplugged coding to schools and teachers across South Africa. At that stage, the draft curriculum for coding and robotics was just published. And there was a huge debate in rooms, you might not have been aware of them, where we shouted at each other about whether unplugged coding is good enough. I was blamed that I'm pushing something that is inferior, wanting to take away technology from the disadvantaged child. But we trained 30,000 teachers, and we believe that we didn't write the curriculum. Someone else wrote the curriculum. But we do believe we played a huge role in changing the national mood in the country. A very senior person in DBE once said, "What is this unplugged nonsense?" And 3 weeks ago, the basic coding and robotics curriculum for foundation phase was promulgated, 100% unplugged. This means all the schools in South Africa can implement this curriculum. I want to say that we played a role. I can't say we played the whole role, but we changed people's minds. We're also very excited about impact research studies going on in South Africa at this stage. There's a PhD study at Mandela University looking at the impact of coding, unplugged coding in the maths classroom. The teacher already has anecdotal evidence. She now just needs to prove it. The real impact is the individual lives that have been changed. And I could keep you busy for hours about real people. May I start with Buhle? The first Mandela Day tournament, 2018, he played with 30 other kids at Father's House Church in Port Elizabeth. 2 days later, he sent me a photo showing that he's finished all 35 levels, which is very complex. It takes me 90 minutes to do one. I took him to a software company, and now driving back that afternoon, he said to me, "Prof, my life has been changed." That was his words. He carried on, finished matric, got a diploma, and is now a software developer at one of the biggest companies in the Eastern Cape. And then there's Gqeberha from Garankuwa. He was invited to one of our workshops in grade 11. He WhatsApped me. I can show you the WhatsApp. He said to me, "Prof, I went to this workshop thinking there's no plan for my life. I'm going nowhere." He enjoyed the coding so much that day that within a term, he pushed up his school marks by 25% to end up matric getting a bursary from AWS, Amazon Web Services, and is now studying computer engineering at the University of Pretoria. Those are the stories that keeps us going. I want to close with this very famous quote from Nelson Mandela. You all know it, I don't need to read it. But in that he says, "The daughter of a farmer becomes a doctor. I know a son of a factory worker that's on his way to become a computer scientist. The daughter of a seamstress that's on her way to becoming a business analyst." When I see this quote, I think of something I was shown in March. We attended the Nelson Mandela Foundation offices, and they showed me a scribe of one of Mandela's conversations in 1986 with a young family member. And they were talking about a boy in Tata, and he said to her, the scribe says, "You must bring your son to Cape Town to teach him about computers, because this is the future for us." Nelson Mandela, 1986. And that backs me back to Kunu, where Mandela stayed. You remember Gogo? Bavuyile attended a workshop of ours last year, about 10 coding workshops, was convinced that computers is his thing, got 6 distinctions in matric, is now studying computer science. Bavuyile is Gogo's grandson. It's not a golden bullet for Gogo or for their family. But Bavuyile, if he can overcome his challenges, he's going to break the cycle of poverty in his family. And that's why we do it.